Kristi Noem is the front person, but she's not the day-to-day person who's really doing stuff at DHS. That person is Corey Lewandowski. Corey Lewandowski, rumored to be her boyfriend for a long time now. They met during this Trump administration season 1. But he, for example, was at that meeting, the 2-hour meeting that Kristi Noem had with Donald Trump. Why? Because Corey Lewandowski is the guy who's actually behind a lot of these various maneuvers when it comes to DHS. They say, if you want to get anything done at DHS, you need to go to Corey Lewandowski. You don't go to Kristi Noem. So Noem and Lewandowski, who again apparently are rolling around together for quite some time now. But the important thing you should know about Lewandowski also is that he has a history of brutish sexual harassment. I mean, like, with physical sexual harassment involved. Go back and look at it. I don't want to get into the details right now. And he was also involved, you may remember, at one of these Trump rallies with grabbing a reporter, again, female reporter. This is kind of his jam. And he left a bruise on her arm. Do you remember that entire thing? No. Ultimately, charges were dropped. But that's who Corey Lewandowski is, at least historically, within this crew. But the thing you need to know now is that he is very much relevant to Kristi Noem. I'll put it another way. If she goes, he goes. All right? That is the confrontation that we're talking about. That was at one of Trump's rallies. You can see Lewandowski and this reporter, and he grabbed the reporter away, actually left a bruise on her arm. Thank you, Tony, for finding that. You're amazing. But in any case, my mentioning this is just to give you a sort of 3D picture of what's happening within this administration. Anyway, Noem and Lewandowski met with Trump, and apparently, Trump's full speed ahead, will make some changes. They do seem to be modifying their position. The whole thing about brandishing a gun, domestic terrorists. They seem to be backing off on that a little bit. Here is a bit of the CNN stuff. Let's do that. The CNN statements about what was being said by Stephen Miller, I think, are reported in this piece. Go ahead, Tony, if you would. It's the part 1 of CNN. Thank you,
John. And I just want to point to this very remarkable statement to our colleague Kristen Holmes from Stephen Miller yesterday. As you said, in the immediate aftermath of federal agents' killing of Alex Pretty on Saturday, we heard Stephen Miller go to social media almost immediately. He referred to Pretty as, quote, a domestic terrorist, also a would-be assassin. And you can believe that he was behind a lot of the messaging that was coming from this White House. But then last night, in this statement to our colleague Kristen Holmes, he says, quote, the White House had provided clear guidance to DHS that the extra personnel that had been sent to Minnesota for force protection should be used for conducting fugitive operations to create a physical barrier between the arrest teams and the disruptors. He goes on to say, we are evaluating why the CBP team may not have been following that protocol. He also says that some of the original statements that were coming from the Department of Homeland Security were, quote, based on reports from CBP on the ground. So clearly shifting blame there, and notably not disputing that he was involved in those statements.
Can I get an I blame you?
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right.
I blame you.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely what happened. So interesting that Miller, who is truly cranked up to 10 all the time, all of a sudden redirects a little bit and turns the turret of blame to the report he was getting from the ground. Here is part 2 of that little piece.
The president had to backtrack on saying NATO troops weren't on the front lines in Afghanistan, and now clearly backing off a little bit in Minneapolis. That's a lot different than we've seen before from this administration, Jeff.
John, it absolutely is. It's not only unusual, it just hasn't happened, particularly on immigration. Look, this was intended to be a strength for President Trump. It always has been. It's one of the things that helped get him elected in the first place back in 2016 and certainly reelected in 2024. Now immigration is viewed by Republicans as a weakness for this administration. That explains the flow chart that you were pointing out earlier. Stephen Miller isn't doing this simply because he's suddenly had a change of heart. He's doing this because even a few Republicans Republicans, a small but growing number of Republicans are beginning to confront and challenge and question this administration. It is all coming, of course, as the very as the very mission in Minnesota is being reviewed.
I think the important takeaway there, and I just think it's almost literary, is the irony that was pointed out here. He didn't point it out as ironic, but it is. The very thing that propelled you to power, which was complaints about the southern border and immigration and immigrants in our communities, that very thing may be the kryptonite that takes you down, because you have so mangled policy, you have so perverted what was the mission, you have so terrorized so many communities that you lose the popular support around the very issue that brought you to power. I think that is something worth keeping in mind. Now, that doesn't mean that they're backing off on it, but it does mean that they know that the terra firma that they landed on with this issue is not so firma anymore. It is really beginning to shift. You have more and more communities that don't want this. So it could be a political issue for Trump. Now, as you know, when it comes to Trump and staying in power and everything, I have a whole other, and I'm going to talk to Tom Hartman about this, a whole other list of concerns, okay, in terms of giving up power. But I'm just saying, if you play the traditional politics of it, he's in trouble on this issue, straight up. This administration is in trouble on this issue. That's why I think getting rid of Bovino, the question about Kristi Noem, the question about Lewandowski, even Stephen Miller, these are all people who you think are bulletproof, but they may not be. Meantime, one of those who's been critical is an outgoing senator. Do you have the Thune stuff? Here's Thune speaking openly about the fact that Kristi Noem should be out.
To then think that we can move on before this has been adjudicated.
Senator, do you have confidence in Secretary Noem?
None at all. No, she's. I've tried to maintain confidence, but look, I've done and we'll be sharing this information. We've done a Trump 1, Trump 2 comparison of disaster relief. There's no comparison whatsoever. Trump 1 was right on with disaster recovery. You think about Matthew and Florence, and this one, she's not even handling the other part of her job. I mean, at one point she thought FEMA should be eliminated. To give you an idea of how incompetent I think she is, she actually thought FEMA should be eliminated. And when she had a FEMA director said he didn't think that was a good idea, she fired him within 24 hours. Now she understands that that is an important part of her job. These are like amateurish assistant manager sort of thought processes going into somebody who's a secretary in a cabinet level position. It's unacceptable.
Does she need to step down? Does she need to?
Stephen Miller is in the same boat. This guy, after doing the stupid comments he made about Greenland getting the president in a difficult circumstance, is one of the people that came out publicly and said that this guy was a terrorist before he had even talked with anybody on the ground. And that's clearly not the case now. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, Stephen Miller never fails to live up to my expectations of incompetence.
Why do you think he should be fired?
I'm going to leave that up to the president. I can tell you, if I were president, neither one of them would be in Washington right now.
But do you think Noem should step down?
I think Noem needs to decide what. I think if Noem looks at her body of work, I could not be. If I were in her position, I can't think of any point of pride over the last year. She's got to make her own decision, or the president does. But she has taken this administration into the ground on an issue that we should own. We should own the issue of border security and immigration, but they have destroyed that for Republicans. Something that got the president elected, they have destroyed it through their incompetence.
That is exactly the point I just made. I'm sorry, that's Tom Tillis. I think I said Thune.
Yeah.
And Tillis and Murkowski both have stepped out, and there is more coming. That is to say, GOP senators and GOP House reps are beginning to realize what he said at the end. Tillis's point is, we used to own this issue. Now owning this issue is bad. So I think this is a real watershed moment, potentially. Kristi Noem is getting more heat. She should be dismissed. She should be shown the door. She and her boyfriend, I have no idea, no problem with the idea of having a boyfriend. You can have a boyfriend, you can ask his advice, all the rest. But as we said yesterday, if I'm flying you around the country in a special jet that is designed to accommodate your boyfriend, and if your boyfriend is really effectively running the agency, which is based on a lot of reporting what is being done, then we should have a problem with that. And now her use of Coast Guard resources for deportations raises a lot of tension with the military. So she is getting some pushback from the very military that she poses with for pictures, and as she kind of cosplays her role as DHS head. So she has this relationship with U.S. Coast Guard, and apparently they're not happy. The only branch of the U.S. military that is overseen by DHS, those relations are strained because she wanted to shift a lot of Coast Guard resources to her world of ICE, even though those resources were being used at the time in a search and rescue mission to find a missing service member. So you can imagine this is kind of wild when you come forward and go, yeah, I want you to help me out instead of looking for your missing service member. So again, she joined them on operations and visited their ships, posed for pictures, but senior officials are seeing that her approach is taking away from the Coast Guard's traditional missions, and now there is a tension between the Coast Guard and Noem, at least at the highest levels. She's seen a tenfold increase under her leadership in the use of the Coast Guard's aircraft for immigrant deportations. That is something that a lot of Congress people have had a problem with. They have data that's compiled by ICE Flight Monitor, which is a nonprofit group that tracks deportation flights. And it's noted that Coast Guard aircraft are being used, again, 10x what they used to be used for immigrant deportations. It put so much stress on the wing, said one Coast Guard official, referring to the aviation branch of the Coast Guard. Her focus on meeting the Trump administration's deportation quotas appears to further impact Coast Guard operations in the coming months because, according to new guidance issued to the Coast Guard, based on DHS priorities, the air station, which is in Sacramento, the air station is among those responsible for a majority of deportation flights. And they are now to designate their first priority to be the transport of detained immigrants on their C-27 aircraft. The new order is apparently to clash with existing core mission precepts that the Coast Guard had. The search and rescue operations were really their primary goal, their top priority. But now search and rescue is to be moved to a lower priority because, again, of the edict issued by Kristi Noem. So Noem's priorities and senior Coast Guard officials' priorities are not the same priorities. And this leads them potentially on something of a collision course. Again, the whole thing started when this 23-year-old Coast Guardsman went overboard of the vessel that they were on, and that was in the Pacific Ocean. And this is right before Kristi Noem was confirmed. And then after her confirmation, she took all these ships and aircraft that surged to the Pacific to find this guardsman and began to use some of those resources for her work in flying detained immigrants. So this is an ongoing issue. I just mentioned it's the latest issue with Kristi Noem, and it continues to be something of a problem for her and maybe a tension point. And we'll see how it all shakes out. As you know, she has taken a step back from the spotlight, and that's largely because much of what's being done in her name and in the name of ICE is not popular with the American people. It's not popular politically. And the stink of it is even getting on Trump. He's said, boy, some of that stuff doesn't look good, which for him is it's a major step back. With the midterms coming up, I always figure with Trump, it's all about Trump. That's really all he cares about. He doesn't really care about the GOP. I mean, he only cares about the GOP winning because he wants to prevent the Democrats from investigating, from starting impeachment, et cetera. It's all back to him. So he doesn't care about a legacy for the GOP or some kind of policy. He's absolutely only concerned with himself. And all of your books and all of your pieces through the years have said that. So tell me how the politics of the midterms works out, and Trump trying to put his thumb on the scale at Fulton County, et cetera, with these ways in which the election may be influenced.
Donald has to be concerned that a majority Democrats, even if they only win the House, that's sort of the end of his presidency. They're going to tie him up. He's right when he says they're going to find a way to impeach me. They're absolutely going to impeach him if they get back in the majority, but they're going to do much more than that. They're going to impeach some of his appointees. They're going to order investigations that will be devastating to Trump. They're going to look into this Tulsi Gabbard whistleblower case that we don't know what went on. All we know is that somebody at the National Security Agency, which does signals intelligence or SIGINT, picked up a phone call between someone in the White House and some foreign agents that was alarming, apparently five alarming, and Tulsi Gabbard buried it. We know that foreign governments have let out to reporters around the world who deal with national security in their countries that Trump has been fast and loose with sources and methods of intelligence. We know this. How do we know it? Well, this person told us, or we got it through this way. It means that you don't ever let out sources and methods. When I've written about spy matters in the past, I would never even hint in a story about how did they know this. But Donald has done that. We know he's given away secrets. We know he stole thousands and thousands of pages of sensitive secrets. And why would he do that, since he doesn't even know what they mean, except to monetize them, to sell them? And so Democrats get control of the House, they are going to run. And I would hope on behalf of our nation that the Democrats already have lawyers lined up and investigators who know how to dig, who've thought through who to subpoena and who to squeeze. A lot of law enforcement happens because you go to one person and say, we got you cold. You want to go to prison, or you want to tell us what's going on and provide the support to get the people who are more important. And so Donald has to be, he knows that that's trouble. He said he knows that this will be nothing but trouble for him unless the Republicans keep control.
Yeah, and boy, when you detail it that way, it really does seem as though it underscores the fact that he will do everything, and I mean everything, to prevent the GOP from losing the upper hand in this midterm election. And I'm scared to imagine what those things might be. And you mentioned Gabbard in relation to the whistleblower report, which is shocking. And A, I'm wondering why there isn't more congressional follow-up on that. And B, what her role is in the Fulton County thing. I mean, how she, and to me, last thing on Tulsi Gabbard, just as a personal note, in the sweepstakes of who sold their soul most, it's really a photo finish, but she may be the leader. I mean, it's incredible. Did
she have one to sell would be the deeper question.
That's a good question. Anyway, speak to this.
Well, so how in the world could Tulsi Gabbard have anything in her purview as DNI, Director of National Intelligence? She's the person responsible for overseeing, coordinating our 17 intelligence agencies to do with Fulton County. Well, Trump gave us the answer to that. He said that they're going to show that the ballots were being transmitted out of the country and changed and sent back. Well, first of all, if you're going to cheat on the ballots, you don't need a Rube Goldberg machine to do so, and it would leave all sorts of evidence if you did that. If the NSA didn't pick that up, I would raise serious questions about the tens of billions of dollars they get in their budget every year. But everything Trump is doing here is designed to intimidate people who might not support him to not come to the polls. Bannon the other day, we're going to surround the polls with ICE agents. And there's no ripe case. You can't go to court about that today, but the Democrats are idiots, and so are the good government, let's turn out the vote people who are bipartisan. If they aren't already devising legal strategies and have drafted papers they're ready to fill in a couple of blanks and give to a judge, if ICE agents show up at any polling place in America, and there's an example of where police chiefs and mayors should be leaned on right today. You know, one of the questions to ask Karen Bass, if ICE agents surround a polling place in LA, will you direct the LAPD to arrest those officers or to remove those officers? And the only answer to that should be absolutely, of course.
Yeah, although LA is honestly, while it might have been the locus of a move early on, it concerns me less in terms of the midterms than some of these other places, you know, David.
Sure.
Now about what's happening with the purchase of all these warehouses nationwide for detention centers. These are effectively concentration camps, and I'm sorry to use the term because I don't mean to say in any way they're the death camps of the Reich in World War II, but they are concentration camps in the sense that these people have been detained for everything from ethnicity to, you know, legal status, if you will, and in the tens of thousands these will house, these various places. These are the largest jails of any kind. There is two warehouses in Texas, $172 million the government has paid. A third in El Paso could be, again, among the largest places to hold people in the country. These are between 8,500 and 10,000 people in many of these places. There are plans to use as many as 23 warehouses for detaining thousands of immigrants arrested by federal agents in Minneapolis and other cities, and the administration has paid $102 million for a site near Hagerstown, Maryland. It goes on and on and on. This is the Department of Homeland Security with our taxpayer money buying up all of these warehouse spaces.
Well, we already have sworn testimony from people who are in some of these facilities that women are not given, there's no toilets for the women, they're given diapers, that there's no menstrual products provided, there's no way to clean your clothes, that the food is not edible. And this is being provided by private prisons. They are refusing entry to members of Congress to these facilities, even though Congress passed a law and Republicans voted for this that said members of Congress can show up unannounced and they are to be granted admission, and they're being turned away. In fact, a congresswoman in New Jersey is being prosecuted on the claim that she assaulted ICE officers or Customs and Border Patrol officers. I think the video we've seen shows that's nonsense, but this is all intimidation. You will do what we tell you to do, and if you don't, we will lock you up. I'm an American citizen to ICE. We don't care. They have arrested American citizens. They have deported Americans. Technically, you can't deport an American citizen. They have removed American citizens from their own country. We have children who are being held, large groups of them who are going to suffer lifelong mental damage. Right now, you could free all those children and they're still going to suffer for the rest of their lives. And if you go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque, you should go right now to your clerical leader and say, why is this not what you're going to preach about on our next meeting? How can you look the other way? Just take up the children, you know, just the children. There are horrific photos you can see where some have been leaked out and have gotten out about what's happening to these children. And you have older children, you know, sometimes 8 years old, who are helping take care of babies, of changing the toddlers' diapers. This is beyond despicable, and the people who should be calling this out are the faith leaders of America. I don't care if you're a televangelist, you should be leaned on. Where are you about this? Now, I can tell you part of what will happen. I jousted with some people, including high school classmates of mine, about the Kid Rock versus Bad Bunny. And I posted some Kid Rock lyrics, which he still sings, about raping girls. I mean, really vile lyrics, and there are a lot of them. Some others were posted. And my classmates who hold themselves out as Christians all the time said, well, I as a Christian, I don't make judgments. Right. You know, you didn't decide who to vote for in an election. You didn't decide which model car to buy. You didn't make a judgment about who to marry. I mean, what a ridiculous cop-out. But there are other posts since I've seen where other people have raised the same issue about Kid Rock and his pro-child rape music. And that's what he does. He sings in favor of child rape, including the Olsen twins, who were 14 when he talked about them. And
the lyric is, I like them underage. Yeah.
Yeah. And mandatory, I think it's called statutory. You know, some call it statutory. I call it mandatory, talking about girls. And there is, we need to have, one of the things you can do, you don't have to go march in the cold. You can organize people who belong to your religious institution and basically tell the pastor, this is going to be a big subject. You're going to bring it up every week and be a leader on it. Or, you know what? We'll just find another pastor, imam, rabbi.
It's funny, I did my own back and forth with someone who was actually on Trump's defense of freedom of religion. It's really, he's underpinned by strong Christianity. It's really a Christian nationalist movement, but he's there on the board. And I said, boy, as a Christian, aren't you bothered by these detention centers and the way in which they're just zip tying 9-year-olds and forcing them to sit on the curb in the freezing cold in Chicago? And then I went through like a series of things like that. And he said, well, I'm okay with the policy, but I don't like I don't like a lot of what's happening. I don't like a lot of the things that I'm seeing, but I think the policy is a good one. That's usually the shimmy that they do. You know, well, I don't approve all of it.
The answer to that is,
yeah.
The answer to that is, if you don't like the way they're executing the policy, where are you? Why are you not being a citizen? Why are you not speaking up? By the way, there's news today about a man who has a green card, who is absolutely legal in this country, who has been held since September and cannot get before a judge. And the Trump administration, in a filing in the Federal Register, federalregister.gov, that is the government's official rule book. When they want to change the rules of the executive branch, they have to post it there. They've posted under a rule that they don't have to pay attention to your comments, but you can file comments if you want. They just make it clear they're never going to read them.
Oh my God!
And the purpose of the rule, the purpose of the rule change is to ensure that if ICE has grabbed you and plans to deport you, that you will not be able to have your case heard by a judge. Now, only Congress can suspend habeas corpus, the right to be brought before a judge. The whole story, the Count of Monte Cristo being thrown in the dungeon on the island off the coast of France, is about not having habeas corpus. There's a reason it's in our Constitution, but it is called a privilege, not a right, saying that Congress can suspend it in times of insurrection or war. And there is no insurrection going on. No reasonable judge is anywhere going to say the demonstrations are an insurrection. There's no armed revolt going on. And they want very much to simply be able to grab people and remove them, to send them to death camps, and that's what CCOT is in Latin America, or send people to Uganda and other places. Especially they want to send gay people to Uganda, where they are highly likely to be murdered. It's a crime to be gay in that country. So this is all part of the consolidating the dictator's power, intimidating people so they don't respond. And the need is for moral leadership. Now, during the civil rights movement, there were lots of pastors in the South who got up and spoke against integration, spoke against equality. Those sort of people will always be around, but what's the excuse for the vast majority of moral and religious leaders? And so really, those of you who go to church, go to synagogue, go to temple, go to any religious meetings, I implore you, get other people together and then go to your leader and say, this is a really important moral issue. This is the reason that we have religious training and moral training, and we cannot remain silent. And a one-off isn't going to do it either.
Yeah, this is something that, as you say, reveals kind of the troubled underbelly of a lot of organized faith, because many of these centers of faith, where you'd think the morality isn't even in a gray area, they find themselves on the wrong side of many of these issues. I mean, prejudice, bigotry, and persecution has lived quite comfortably in many of these places to which you referred.
Yeah.
I
Well,
wanna ask you
in
what-
the
Yeah, go ahead.
New World slavery, where people were property, you could maim them, rape them, brutalize them, kill them. Not the slavery of the ancient world that the Bible talks about. Very different institution. It was promoted by ministers and pastors. I mean, there is no evil that you cannot find people who claim to be acting on God's behalf you will find people who will promote it, whether it's opposing child labor laws or anything else. But that's not the majority of people who are in that area of life. And the followers need to talk to the leaders, and not a one-off. That's really important, not a one-off. You got to beat that drum until something happens. Nobody who voted in this country for putting thousands of people into a former shopping mall or department store and holding them without adequate toilets, showers, decent food, air conditioning, heating. I mean, to see little children wrapped up on a cement floor in a Mylar blanket, those super lightweight little blankets, is just beyond belief. I mean, think about your own children. Think about yourself when you were a child and how this would have traumatized you for life. And it's being done by you, because we are, to some degree, still a democracy. And this is being done in your name. You cannot escape accountability for this personally. And if some of you don't sleep well tonight, sorry about that, but that's part of the price you pay for freedom.
It's morally repugnant on a level that I never thought I'd conceive of in this country. And it is getting, as you have noted here in past conversations, supercharged by this budget. I mean, there are many more ICE officers, 10,000 more online, and there are going to be many more taking over America's cities. And this private militia, which is a Trump militia, will very much likely have a hand in voter suppression in the midterms as well. So you have, both the politics of it and the lack of humanity.